He was a pastor loved by many. She was the daughter of a feared native doctor. Two worlds that were never meant to meet, until love crossed the line. When faith met temptation, a secret was born, and what happened next shook an entire village. This isn't just a story about sin and forgiveness. It's about mercy, redemption, and the power that turns enemies into family. So grab your seat, drop a hello in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Because tonight, you're about to hear the story of how grace defeated darkness in The Pastor and the Native Doctor's Daughter. The morning sun crept through the thin curtains of a small compound in Ora village. Birds chirped softly, and the faint sound of a distant drum echoed from the forest. Inside the hut, a young woman named Mira sat quietly, her hands resting on her knees. Her father, Chief Okena, was the village's most feared native doctor, known for charms, curses, and mysterious rituals that kept even the bravest men trembling. Mira, however, was different. She didn't like her father's dark ways. She longed for peace, for something purer, something like the faith she had secretly been learning about in church. It all began the day a new pastor arrived in Ora village. His name was Pastor Edwin. Tall, calm, and humble, he spoke with gentleness that melted hearts. When he preached, people listened, not because they feared him, but because they felt something new: hope. Mira had sneaked to one of his crusades one evening. She stood at the back, wrapped in a scarf so no one would recognize her. But the more she listened, the more her heart stirred. "Who is this man who speaks with such peace?" she whispered to herself. After the service, Pastor Edwin walked toward the crowd, greeting people warmly. When his eyes met Mira's, he smiled kindly. "You're new here," he said softly. Mira looked down, shy. "Yes, I came to listen." The pastor nodded. "God must have wanted you here tonight." Mira's lips curved slightly. She hadn't felt kindness in a long time. At home, her father's voice was thunder, his eyes were fire. But here, just for a moment, she felt calm. When Mira returned home that night, Chief Okena noticed something in her eyes: light. "Where have you been?" he thundered, pounding his staff on the ground. "Nowhere, father," she lied, trembling. "Nowhere," he repeated. "You reek of that church's incense." He stood, his beads clinking. "I warned you, girl. That man and his kind are enemies of our bloodline. If you ever step near that church again, I will disown you." Mira lowered her gaze, her heart racing. "Yes, father." But inside, she knew she would go again. Days turned into weeks, and Mira kept attending church in secret. Pastor Edwin noticed her devotion. Sometimes after prayer meetings, she stayed behind to sweep the floor or arrange chairs. "You have a good heart," he told her once. "But you seem burdened." Mira sighed. "My father hates this place. He says your God wants to destroy our family's power." Edwin smiled gently. "God doesn't destroy, he frees." Mira looked at him, confused yet drawn in. "Then why does freedom hurt?" she asked. Pastor Edwin looked at Mira with quiet concern. "Sometimes freedom hurts because we must leave behind what chains us," he said gently. "But pain is not punishment, Mira. It's the sign that something new is being born." His words stayed in her heart long after she left the church that evening. When she returned home, she sat by her small window and watched the stars. For the first time in years, she whispered a prayer under her breath. "If you're real, God, please show me who you are." The next morning, her father's apprentice ran in shouting, "Chief, the pastor is preaching near the market square again." Chief Okena grunted. "Let him preach. His mouth will soon bring him trouble." But when he turned, he noticed Mira's face light up at the mention of the pastor. "You," he barked. "You've been sneaking there again, haven't you?" Mira froze. "No, father, I swear I haven't." Chief Okena stood and struck his staff on the ground. "If I ever find you near that man, I'll send you to your mother's grave." But the heart is a stubborn thing. That same evening, when the moon rose high, Mira wrapped herself in a shawl and sneaked out. She walked quietly down the dusty path until she reached the open field where villagers had gathered under lanterns. Pastor Edwin's voice rose through the night, calm but powerful. "You are not what your past says you are," he declared. Mira stood at the back, trembling. It was as if he spoke directly to her. After the sermon, Edwin noticed her again. "You came back," he said with a soft smile. Mira nodded. "I couldn't stay away." He studied her face, sensing the war inside her. "You don't have to hide, Mira. God knows your name." Tears filled her eyes. "My father would kill me if he knew I was here," she whispered. Edwin sighed deeply. "Then let's pray for him," he said, "because no darkness lasts forever." That night, they prayed together. Mira knelt on the cool grass while Edwin placed his hand gently on her shoulder. He prayed for her heart, for her courage, and even for her father's soul. When they finished, she looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You pray like you know me," she said softly. Edwin smiled. "Because God does." She blushed, unable to meet his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, something neither could name. The weeks that followed were filled with whispers. Villagers began to notice how often Mira visited the church. Some said she was bewitched. Others claimed the pastor had used charms on her. When word reached Chief Okena, he erupted. "That boy thinks he can take my daughter from me," he roared. "We shall see who the real god of this land is." He began preparing charms and sacrifices. At the same time, Mira and Edwin's meetings grew more frequent and more dangerous. One evening, after a midweek service, Mira lingered while everyone else had gone. "I wish I could stay here forever," she whispered. Edwin turned to her, his voice low. "You can someday. God has plans for you, Mira." She looked at him, her heart thudding. "Plans? I only know pain." He stepped closer. "Maybe this is where healing begins." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The air between them grew heavy, confused by faith and something deeper neither understood. Days turned into months. Myra's father grew sicker, but his anger did not fade. Rumors spread like wildfire. The pastor and the native doctor's daughter were too close. Some claimed to have seen them walking together by the stream. When Edwin heard the talk, he tried to distance himself, but the connection had already taken root. Myra's eyes found his even when she tried to look away. And though they both prayed for strength, temptation whispered in the quiet hours. One night, after heavy rain, Mira went to the church seeking refuge. She was soaked, shivering, and crying. Edwin found her kneeling before the altar. "What happened?" he asked. "My father cursed me," she sobbed. "He said I should never step foot in this church again." Edwin helped her up. "You're safe here," he said softly, wrapping her in his coat. Their eyes met, and something inside both of them broke free. That night, what began as comfort turned into something neither had planned. When dawn came, guilt filled the air. Mira sat quietly by the altar, trembling. "We've sinned," she whispered. Edwin turned away, tears in his eyes. "I failed God," he said. "I failed you." She reached for his hand. "I don't blame you," she said, her voice small. Maybe God will forgive us." He nodded slowly. "He always does. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." 2 weeks passed in silence. Mira stopped attending church, and Pastor Edwin's sermons grew shorter, quieter, almost hollow. The villagers noticed his change, but said nothing aloud. One afternoon, Mira sat behind her father's hut, feeling waves of nausea wash over her. At first, she thought it was stress. But when her body began to change, the truth struck her heart like lightning. She was carrying Pastor Edwin's child. Fear gripped her. She buried her face in her hands and whispered, "God, what have I done?" Her secret didn't stay hidden for long. One of the market women noticed her swollen belly and spread the news like wildfire. By sunset, the entire village buzzed with gossip. "Did you hear? The pastor impregnated the native doctor's daughter. What a shame! How could a man of God fall so low?" The voices filled the air. Mira stayed inside, weeping quietly. She knew her father would soon find out, and when he did, there would be no mercy. That evening, Chief Okena stormed into her room, his eyes blazing. "Whose child is this?" he roared. Mira fell to her knees, trembling. "Father, please, answer me," he thundered. "Whose child?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Pastor Edwin's," she whispered. The silence that followed was deadly. Chief Okena raised his hand to strike her, but stopped halfway. His voice dropped to a growl. "So the man who preaches against evil has defiled my bloodline?" He stormed out, shouting, "He will pay with his life." By morning, the whole village gathered near the church. Pastor Edwin stood at the pulpit, pale but composed. "I have sinned," he said in a trembling voice, "and I ask for your forgiveness." The crowd murmured angrily. "Forgiveness?" shouted one man. "You deceived us all." Another woman spat on the ground. "You touched the daughter of the very man you called a heathen." Edwin bowed his head. "I will accept whatever punishment you give me." Before anyone could speak further, Chief Okena appeared, dressed in his red wrapper and beads, holding his staff high. "There will be no forgiveness," he shouted. "You brought shame upon my name, my daughter, and your so-called church. Tonight, your God will face mine." The crowd gasped. He turned to the people. "At midnight, I will summon the spirits, and we shall see whose power is greater, the god of this liar or the gods of Ora." The village split that day. Some sided with the chief, others with the pastor. Mira, terrified, begged her father to reconsider. "Please, father, don't hurt him," she cried. "You don't understand. I love him." Chief Okena froze. "Love," he repeated slowly, then let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You've been bewitched, girl." He spat on the ground. "If he truly loved you, he would have married you before touching you." Myra's heart broke. She wanted to defend Edwin, but words failed her. That night, the sky grew dark and heavy with thunder. The villagers gathered near the shrine, holding torches that flickered in the wind. Chief Okena stood before his altar, chanting, while Pastor Edwin knelt on the opposite side, praying aloud. "Father, forgive us," Edwin murmured. "Show them you are still God." Lightning flashed across the sky. The drums grew louder. Okena raised a calabash, chanting curses in the old tongue. Suddenly, the wind blew it from his hand, shattering it into pieces. The crowd gasped. Mira screamed and ran toward her father. "Stop, father, please." But Okena pushed her aside. "You brought this shame. You will not stop me." As he turned to continue his ritual, his body trembled. He clutched his chest and fell to his knees. "Father," Mira cried, rushing to him. The villagers watched in silence as the great native doctor collapsed. Pastor Edwin dropped his head, tears streaming down his face. "God, have mercy," he whispered. They carried Chief Okena home that night. He lay unconscious, his breath shallow. The next morning, the village was quiet. Mira sat by his bedside, praying softly. "Please, father, don't die. I need you to forgive me." Hours passed before his eyes finally fluttered open. He looked weak but calm. "Mira," he whispered, "the man you love, his God is real." Tears filled her eyes. "Father," he nodded slowly. "I saw a light when I fell, brighter than any flame I've ever conjured." From that day, everything changed. Chief Okena burned his charms and idols. He stopped performing rituals and began attending church with Mira. The villagers were stunned. Some said he had gone mad. Others said he'd found peace. Pastor Edwin, though still ashamed, continued his ministry quietly. Mira gave birth months later, a baby boy with calm eyes and a peaceful smile. When Chief Okena saw the child, he named him Chisholm. "God is with me." But not everyone was ready to forgive. Some elders called for Pastor Edwin's dismissal. He cannot continue to preach holiness after such sin, they argued. Edwin agreed to step down for a while. "If sitting down will heal hearts, I will sit," he told the congregation. Mira stood beside him, holding their son. "He may have fallen," she said softly, "but he did not lie about God's mercy." The crowd fell silent. Some wept. Slowly, forgiveness began to return to the village. Months later, Chief Okena visited Pastor Edwin's home. I came to ask you something, he said quietly. Edwin bowed his head. Anything, sir. Okenna looked at him deeply. Marry my daughter properly. Not because of shame, but because of love. Edwin's eyes widened. Are you sure? The older man nodded. If your God can forgive me, who am I not to forgive you? Tears filled Edwin's eyes as he clasped Okenna's hands. Thank you, sir. The wedding was simple but powerful. The same villagers who once mocked them now danced and sang praises. Mira wore a white gown, her baby boy carried by her father, who stood proudly at her side. When the pastor kissed his bride, the crowd cheered. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a symbol that grace could rise from guilt and peace could bloom where hatred once ruled. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, Chief Okenna raised his cup. To new beginnings, he said. Mira smiled at Edwin. To mercy, she replied. Edwin nodded. To the God who never abandons us, even when we fail. They all laughed softly. Outside, the rain began to fall, washing the village clean once more. Weeks after their wedding, peace slowly returned to Ora village. Pastor Edwin began preaching again, this time not as a perfect man, but as one who had been forgiven much. His words carried a new kind of power, one born from humility. Grace, he would say, isn't the absence of mistakes, but the miracle that rises after them. People listened differently now. Even those who once mocked him sat quietly, moved by his honesty. Mira watched from the front row, her son sleeping in her arms, pride filling her heart. Life was not without its whispers. Some villagers still refused to attend his church. He's a man who fell, they said. His past will always follow him. But others defended him. Even the sun rises after a storm, an elder replied. As time went on, the church grew again, stronger, more united. And slowly, those who doubted began to return one by one until the benches were full again. Mira, now a mother, became a pillar of strength beside her husband. She led women's gatherings, teaching others how to forgive, how to heal, and how to trust again. We are not defined by what broke us, she would say softly. We are defined by what we rebuild. Her calm spirit drew many to her side. Even young girls who once feared her father's compound now came to her for guidance. Chief Okenna changed more than anyone expected. The man who once cursed the name of God now spent his mornings reading the Bible with his grandson on his lap. He often said, "If I had known light could feel this peaceful, I would have let go of darkness long ago." The villagers began to call him Papa Chisholm, a name that carried new respect. His home, once filled with charms, now held nothing but warmth and laughter. But the true test of faith came a year later, when sickness struck the village. A strange fever spread quickly, claiming lives. Fear returned to Oro. The people begged Chief Okenna to return to his old ways, to call the spirits for protection. He shook his head firmly. Those spirits never saved us, he said. But God will. He turned to Pastor Edwin. Let's pray for our people. Together, they led the village in fasting and prayer. Within a week, the sickness began to fade. The miracle was undeniable. Even the skeptics bowed their heads in gratitude. The God of Edwin and Okenna has spoken, they whispered. For the first time, the entire village came together, both old believers and new, to give thanks. Pastor Edwin stood before them and said, "This is not my doing. It is the mercy of a God who forgives sinners and heals the broken." His voice trembled with emotion. That night, the stars shone brighter than ever. Mira sat outside their home, holding her son and watching fireflies dance above the grass. Edwin joined her quietly. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she asked. He smiled. "Sometimes I wonder why God chose us. But then I remember, He uses the broken to show His strength." Mira leaned against him. "I think He wanted the village to see that no one is beyond grace." As years passed, their love deepened. Chisholm grew into a bright, cheerful boy who loved listening to his grandfather's stories about the past. "I was once a proud man," Okenna would tell him, "but pride almost destroyed me. It was your mother's faith and your father's prayers that saved us." Chisholm would smile and say, "Then I'll pray like Papa and love like Mama." And Okenna would laugh softly, pride glistening in his old eyes. The church became a place of healing for many who had once given up on God. Widows, orphans, and outcasts found family there. Pastor Edwin and Mira built a small school beside the church, where children could learn without fear or payment. "Education is a light too," Mira said, smiling as she watched the children recite their lessons. "Let's give them more than words. Let's give them hope." When Chief Okenna passed away peacefully years later, the entire village gathered for his burial. There were no drums of war, no chants, no charms, only songs of thanksgiving. Pastor Edwin spoke gently. He once served darkness, but he died in light. Mira wept softly beside her son. Chisholm placed a white flower on his grandfather's grave and whispered, "Thank you for changing." The wind carried his words away, like a prayer. Years later, Ora village stood transformed, a place once known for fear, now known for faith. Pastor Edwin and Mira grew old together, their love still steady, their story told from generation to generation. Children would whisper, "That's the woman the pastor once sinned with, and the man who once angered a native doctor." But the elders would smile and say, "No, that's the couple God used to teach us all that mercy is stronger than judgment." And under the same sky where their pain began, peace finally stayed. And please don't forget to tap the bell so every new folktale reaches you first. Tell us in the comments what you think about the story. And tell us where you're watching from. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this beautiful story with friends, family, and loved ones so they too can remember.